Hey, what's up everybody? Kyle Buckland here with the Artful Souls. Welcome to my plein air demo here on YouTube. It's a beautiful spring morning. I'm excited to be outside, and I often talk about before we start painting we should know what our story is, to our painting. We should know what we're painting, and this morning it's definitely all about the glorious light and life that is out here this morning. It's a beautiful sunny spring morning, and everything is just glowing, so I'm going to try to really get a sense of lightness and vibrancy in my painting. Real quick, I'll go over my palette here. This is Permanent Matter Deep, Cadmium Red Light, Cadmium Yellow Light, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, Ivory Black, Titanium White. And you can see what I've done is I've got my medium here. So this is 2/3 Gamblin Galkit painting medium mixed with about 1/3 Gamsol paint thinner just to thin it down a little bit. And I've went ahead and mixed just a little bit of that up into my white paint. So I just poured about maybe 10 drops or so onto this pile of white, and it just loosens the white paint up a little bit. It makes the color flow into it a little bit better as we go along. So I'm working on a 12x16 panel. This is an old painting that I ended up scraping out and painting over. So this is some white oil paint that I've painted over top of this just to reprime this panel here. So it's got an interesting texture. That's something you can do to recycle an old painting that doesn't work out. And another container here that I have, it's off camera, but I'll show you, is this, my metal brush washer, and this has some paint thinner in it. So this is what I'll be using to clean my brush out in as I work. So the medium is what I'll be dipping my brush in to thin my paint, and the paint thinner is what I'll be using to clean my brush as I go. So we have a couple options when we first start painting. We have to sort of narrow down what it is we want to paint. So one thing I like to do when before I start is I like to try to imagine what I want my painting to look like when it's finished, and this gives me an idea of my composition. So I can, and I want to have a center of interest. Now we know from previous videos, if you've watched, that I want to try to avoid my center of interest being right in the center of the canvas. So in a scene like this where you have the road going off into the distance, generally the center of interest is going to be where the road leads your eye. So it kind of goes around this turn out here, and then we have this big tree that blocks our view and sweeps us back into the view. So the center of interest is really going to be that little bit of road that goes around the turn right before the big tree on the left there where those little fence posts are. We want that area to sort of sparkle with the sunlight, which it's doing anyway. Now if you've watched my videos on design stems, you'll know that another thing I want to consider when I first start painting is I want my painting to have an interesting balanced design. So one thing we can do is to create an S shape throughout the painting. So sometimes before I start painting, I'll just start with a shape that I think will fit this kind of scene, and because this road sort of curves up and around this way, and then we have the mountains and the clouds going back up this way, we can start with this S shape that kind of comes down here, and then wraps around here with the road, and it comes back around here. So what we end up with is this S shape that we're going to try to preserve throughout the design. Now I'm going to put the center of interest right in here somewhere, so just off to the left of the center of the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch in this road. Now I'm not going to get too detailed here. I just want these main lines to give us an idea of just the big shapes. And then I want this mountain to come back up here in the distance, and we can even have some of these clouds sort of come up here and mimic that angle too. So before I start to draw any details, I'm thinking about big shapes. And for this I'm just using cadmium red light and ultramarine blue, which is a nice purple color. And I'm dipping my brush down into my medium to make it nice and fluid so it really flows off the brush. Now, we want to look here. We have this big tree on the left. This is going to stop our eye from going off of the, off of the side of the canvas here. So I'm just going to brush that in. And again, I'm not too worried about getting it exact right now. We can come up and trim it up later and make it look more like the actual tree. I just want a generalization here of this tree. It comes down here, and then the grass sort of comes in front of it. So that's going to stop our eye. We'll draw a couple of these little branches out here, but we won't get too carried away. have this other little ridge line out here. And we have another tree over here. Now what I don't want is equal spacing. So I don't want this space, then a tree, and then another space, and then another tree over here. So I want to make this a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this big tree. I could either move it out or I can move it in. And I think I'm going to move it out to the edge a little bit. So just over here to stop our eye that way. Create a nice little border here for our eye to stay in the picture. Now I want to be careful not to get my darks too dark, and I'm working with like a number 4 flat brush here. And I'm going to go ahead and start with this ultramarine blue and cadmium red light and create a dark, but I'm going to add a little white to it. I'm going to lean it on the warm side here, a little bit more cadmium red light, and again I'm going to add some more white to it. I don't want to get this too dark because I want this picture to be full of light. So if we hit our darks really hard, it's going to create too much contrast in this picture, and I don't want that. So, you know, usually I say start your darks pretty dark, but in this case we're going to leave our darks nice and light and airy. And then I'm going to start massing in these big dark shapes. And when I do this, I try to squint down until my eyes are almost closed, and then, you know, I don't want to draw too many distinctions between areas. So for right now, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and use this same tone to mass in this area that's back here. This is that distant ridge. And just using the brush real quickly, I might lighten it just a little bit out here where this ridge is, and then come back with a slightly darker purple for these trees. Not too dark though. And while we've got this nice dark on our brush, we can go ahead and suggest some of these other little trees out here too. Let me redefine this one just a little bit here. Now notice how these trees flare out at the bottom. And I'm exaggerating that a little bit. That'll make your trees feel like they're really rooted in the ground. And what we don't want is just our trees to look like little telephone poles sticking out of the ground. We want them to have some life to them. And now we've got some trees out here, and I can go ahead and just brush these in. They're going to be a lot smaller, so I'm using just a lighter touch. I don't have to use a smaller brush. I can just actually use a lighter touch, and it'll actually create a smaller brush stroke. So I'm using the brush on its side here, and just a slightly smaller line is coming off of the brush. So I'm using the same purple here throughout here. I'm just varying how dark or how light it is. We'll plenty of time to add color later. We've got a nice shadow here that starts to reach across the path, so I'll go ahead and brush that in a little bit, just a suggestion of it. And go ahead and decide where you want these shadows. Don't be scared to really lay them in, because I've seen that happen before where, you know, you're kind of not sure where you want them, and then you just sort of put them in a couple different places, and then they don't really make sense. But go ahead and decide where you want these shadows to be. There's a couple over here. We'll go ahead and put them in, and let's bring one right across. I don't see it there, but you know, we've got these trees here, so I'm going to bring one across here, across the path. So, you know, you learn to improvise as you paint too, and sometimes you're going to put things in that aren't necessarily there. I want to close this off too, so to get all this feeling of branches back here, I'm just going to scumble. So I've got a little bit of this purple on my brush, but not a lot, and I'm just dragging it across the canvas there and creating some, it's called a scumble, so just a little bit of a light touch, and using the flat side of the brush is going to create a feeling of all these branches back in there. Now this ground plane is nice and light, so I want to be careful what I do here. But there is a distinction between the gravel and the grass, so I want to brush in some of this darker tone for the gravel, but I don't want to get it too dark. Again, we can come back to these and break them up a little bit. I lost my shadow there, so I'll redraw that a little bit. See, I'm not too worried about detail at this stage. It's so easy to start to try to paint detail right away, but let's avoid that. I'm using lots of medium. I'm using these thin washes of purple. We've got these nice fence posts. I'll go ahead and put them in here. A little bit of fence post right there. Creates that feeling of that fence line. And I want to redraw my road. So sometimes you'll start to lose stuff in your wash. You can come back and redraw it with some darker lines. Okay. And so you can see I'm starting to create some pattern and some design already. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to lay in my darks, then I like to come back and see where are some darker darks within those darks. So again, without switching my colors, I'll come back, and this time with a slightly darker purple, I'm going to still add some white to it. There's just a few little shadows within this tree here. A couple places down here by the base. There's even a little cedar tree right in here. We can go ahead and suggest that in there. There are some little shadows in here on this side. Little trees, cedar trees, and little bits of darkness. I can restate some of these trees here. Now, don't make these trees super straight. You know, trees lean all different ways, and it's easy to get in the habit of just drawing your trees nice and straight, but we want to avoid that. Even if they are kind of straight, you know, give them some curves, make them slant this way and that way, make them feel more organic. Going to create a nice feeling to your painting. Now we've got some clouds coming and covering up the light for a minute. Be aware of that. You know, you always want to pay attention. You don't want to start painting the colors of the cloudy landscape once you've started laying in a painting that has light. So a good rule of thumb is pick it and stick it. So decide what lighting effect you want, and then stick with it. So that's a good reason to try to pay attention to your subject, because you might have to end up painting some from memory. A lot of times I'll snap a photograph of my scene right when I start, just in case, because you never know when the light might change. One of the challenges of being an outdoor painter. Alright, so now we've got the darks, and I went in and got some rhythmic touches. Readjust that camera there. I've got some readjustments. Yeah, I've got some shapes there. You know, dark and light. I've got my pattern. I've got my design. I don't want to lose this nice curve of the mountain, so I want to be careful. Let's go ahead and brush in this tone back here too that comes up here at this nice angle, because this is part of my composition. You know, we've got this nice S curve here that sweeps through the painting. I don't want to lose that. And sometimes you might have to wait for the sun to come back out, you know, so don't be afraid to stop and step back from your piece and see how things are going. Now, usually, so here we've got a nice little bit of light coming out on the path right here. So I want to jump in and go ahead and do that. You know, usually I go my darks and then to local colors, but I just saw a little bit of sunlight come out at the end of the path. It was really nice, so I want to just jot down a note of color. So I'm using titanium white and cadmium yellow light and just a touch of ultramarine blue here to give it a green feeling. And I want to just get in there and just hit some of that. It's a beautiful light green right out in here. And we can grade this green as it comes up, so it will make it not as dark, not as light as we come forward. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it as it comes forward. And maybe even a touch of burnt sienna, just to warm it up a little bit, and also to darken the value as we come forward. Now we've got that light coming back out, so now we've got sunlight back on our subject. There's that hint of that color. And also, I want to be careful not to get this too light. I want to be careful because I want to save some lights in the end, some little sparkly lights. So I got to be careful here. I want to go ahead and lay in the color for the gravel road. So this will be a nice light purple with lots of white in it. We can start off with sort of a bluish purple and add a little bit of the cadmium red light as we come forward, just to warm it up a little bit, because things tend to get warmer as they come towards us. We can draw it on over here so that we get some of that color of the gravel road on the other side of that tree. And I'm going to add a little tiny bit of cadmium red light to it as we bring it forward. Now, we've got just a hint of grass in the middle of the path too. I don't want to forget that, but I can come right back over top of this purple with some grass color. While I've got my grass color here on the palette, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just add a little hint of this grass. And this is going to follow perspective too, so this little bit of grass is going to get wider as it comes forward, and that's going to help with a sense of depth as we move off into the distance. So don't forget that even when you have little bits of grass in the middle, you're going to end up with perspective. Let's go ahead and cover up all this white here, and we'll fill this in with this tone for this grass. Now, I want to keep my shapes big and simple, so before I work the grass too much, let's go ahead and lay in our blue mountain back there. It's a nice, sort of a flat blue. It's just got a little variation. I'm going to come right back over these trees. We can bring them back in front of the mountain here in a minute. So you'll see me do that a lot of times. I'll paint something in, and then I'll paint right over it, and then come back and restate it. So that's okay. And I want to go ahead and hit this ridge in front of that now. I can start to see that it needs to be a little warmer. So I'm going to add burnt sienna to my purple color for the mountain. I want to keep the value right though. I don't want to get this too dark. It has to be lighter than the trees. So we can get this, you know, some of these buds are starting to come on these trees, and you get this nice copper color to the trees back there. And again, you can see I'm not being real specific here. I'm letting my colors mingle together and create that nice softness, because we want this painting to have a very soft feeling to it. Okay, and I'm going right back over my trees that are back there. Let's cover all this white up. Okay, and now we've got, I'm going to add just a little bit of ultramarine blue to that to give it just even a darker feeling. And come in here and get some of these bushes that are in the foreground. And let me go ahead and bring this all the way over here and fill in some of this areas over here. I want to cover up all this white. That's what we're working on right now, is getting all this white covered up. Now let's address this little area of grass over here on the other side of the tree. This is a little bit cooler, so I'm adding a little bit more ultramarine blue, but still using that cadmium yellow light. This grass is a little bit further out there in the distance. And is there anywhere I can introduce this bluish green into this area? And there is a couple little areas over here. There's not as much sunlight. And then some areas over here in the foreground too. And then, you know, while I've got this blue-green, that's a nice color for some of those shadows that are coming across this area. So not in the road, but just where they come across here in the grass, we can go ahead and start to introduce those nice blue-greens. Now before we lose them, let's come back here and restate our trees that are in the distance. So again, cadmium red light, ultramarine blue. Bring them right back in over top of this nice warm tone that we have in here. And again, remember, I'm leaning these trees different ways. I want to create this nice organic shape. And I'm also varying the distance between them. I don't want just a bunch of trees back there with all the same distance between them. So remember to, you know, we're dealing with nature. Nature is usually very organic in the way that things are patterned. Our mind wants to make things regular just because that's sort of default mode for us. But remember to add variation to your shapes and your sizes. And it's, you know, it's okay to keep things nice and loose at this stage. Again, we don't want to get too carried away and try to finish anything too early. We have this nice reflected light in these trees. Like I said, everything's glowing. So what I'm going to do is grab a nice pinkish orange color. So I'm using cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, and a tiny bit of that permanent rose to make a nice sort of a reddish pink color. And then add a touch of ultramarine blue to give it a nice purple. But it's going to be a very warm, glowing purple. And then I'm going to put that in for this tone of this tree here, just to create that feeling of light bouncing up into these trees, because there's just so much light bouncing around here. as it comes up, it gets a little bit of like a yellow ochre color to it. So I'm using these warms, but they're the right value. So if I had these warms and they were too dark or too light, this wouldn't work. Then I can come back with some of that purple and outline the tree a little bit. So don't be afraid to use different temperatures in an area, and then you can play with, keeping your values right. But those temperatures are going to create a nice glow to things. So a lot of times in a tree, we might start with a purple, but then we can add warm glowing greens and yellows, and as long as our values are close to what we want in there. Okay. And that could be true for some of these smaller trees too. Just adds a little bits of these warm tones out here. Now, I'm cleaning my brush. I'm still using the same flat brush, so I haven't switched brushes. I just cleaning it as I go. I want to look at these clouds out here and get them brushed in. Some clouds are moving in, so I want to work fast because I know I've checked the weather and it's actually supposed to get cloudy today. So I want to try to capture this sunlight as quickly as possible. So this might be sort of a quicker demo than some of the other ones, and it might end up being sort of a study, but that's okay. I'm just after some color notes here. So these are the bottom of the clouds here. Then we have these nice, there's a lighter yellow to the tops of them, so I'm using cadmium yellow light and then some nice thick white paint, and I'm letting it mingle just a little bit. And we want to keep this angle. Remember how we said we want to keep that angle as the clouds come down from the top here to the right. Now we can put a little bit of phthalo blue in there, which is a nice sky color, but not too much. Be careful with phthalo. It's super powerful. We don't want to get too much of it, but it'll give us a nice glowing sky color here that we can pop in back here and just create a nice feeling of a spring sky back there. Okay, not too much though. Just touch it here, touch and go. Touch and go. Let's get some of this sparkling light down here into this area. So we've got this nice, there are some branches that are catching some light down in here. And again, bear with me, I'm working fast here because the light's changing, and I know I've only got maybe 30 minutes to capture this sunlight. So I'm trying to capture what is making this scene glow. I can come back and redraw the trees, at the end, but I really want to try to capture this sparkling light. I'm going to get some light yellow here. So this is what's, just a little bit of white, and I'm just dragging the brush here to create little bits of sparkling light along the edge of this path. This is what I call high gear. We're in high gear here. So sometimes you create some interesting stuff because you're painting just a little faster than you can think. And it's a challenge here for me to be kind of describing what I'm doing as I go, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoy a good challenge. I always have, so we'll see what happens. So I'm using this light now. I've shifted it towards a warmer light as I'm coming forward, or well, I should say less yellow, not necessarily warmer, but just a little bit more red to it. Now, let me come back and with the purple here and really draw some of these branches in over top of our sky. So we've got these areas. I want these to be a little darker than the clouds, so I'm going to add just a touch of ivory black. Get a feeling of these branches coming up in front of these clouds here in a couple places. And I'll probably go ahead and switch now to a smaller brush. So I've got like a number 2 flat bristle brush, and I want to come back with a dark purple and redraw some of these trees. Again, I got to keep restating them, because we're working quick, so we're painting over things. I want to get a little bit more detailed now because, like I said, we don't want to take too much time here because our light is going to be changing soon. So I'm using this dark purple and I'm drawing some little branches. This branch is really important. It doesn't actually go all the way out like that, but I want it to because of the composition. So that's going to help create more of that S curve in our composition. So you'll see me do that a lot, and that's part of painting is you move stuff around, you know, make things work. We don't want to be slaves to the subject there. Move things around. Restate some of these fence posts here. A lot of times when we brush in, you know, just some little quick tones, then we can come back with some really delicate, detailed strokes and start to really create a nice feeling of completeness without having to do too much, because, you know, your eye sees those tones and starts to fill in the blanks. And then we can contrast those big tones with some nice light, delicate touches here. So that's what we're doing now. I need to get this section of white in the top right covered up. So I want this sort of a grayish purple that's my cloud tone in here. And I'm going to use some medium on my brush so that it flows nicely. And I want to get this filled in. I don't want to leave that white of that canvas. That's really going to mess with us, because I want the lightest part of the painting to be down here, maybe in the clouds a little, and then some down here where the light is really sparkling. Before I draw too many branches over top of these trees back here, I want to try to get them situated to an extent. Then we can start bringing branches out in front of them. I'm going to take these up and out of the canvas. Got some pine trees back there that create a nice solid bit of tone back in here, which is a nice contrast to some of that lacy stuff going on. So I'll put that in there. That'll sort of block our eye from getting caught in that corner. There's also some little pine trees in the foreground here. I want to make sure I don't forget them. They're nice little touches. So I'm using a dark here, dark purple, with a little bit of cadmium red to it to brush in that pine tree. And then there's some little shrubs of pine trees along this fence line. And these little bits, there's a little bit of a reddish copper color that's glowing. So I'm going to use some thicker paint here now. I'm starting to load on some paint and just create just a little bit of some touches here that create that light just glowing back in there. Let's do the same thing with our yellow. Remember we said we want to get this little touches of white and yellow glistening out throughout here. So just some little touches. I want to try to nail the effect first, and then I can decide how far I want to take this piece. And it follows right along the edge of this path. It sort of really glows. So I'm using nice thick globs of paint now and really just laying them on and letting them live. So I'm not overworking these areas too much. I want to create this nice sparkle. It's really what drew me to this morning, is this crisp, clear, sparkly light. And then we can do it again with this orange up here in the bank. Just little tiny touches, and as I touch them, I'm sort of pulling off with the brush so they create a little bit of a texture that suggests that sparkling light. We can do it with a little bit of light green right up in here. A little bit of this goes a long way. It looks good, but you don't want to keep doing it, because then you'll have a whole painting with all that sparkle all over it, and it'll lose its power. So it's the power of reserve. Just a few look great, and we're tempted to do it all over the place, and we can easily ruin it. Let me get some nice Easter egg purple in here. This is just hinted at, this color. It's not, I'm not seeing it really there. Like, it's just a suggestion of that purplish color out in there, but it's going to help give us a feeling of spring, early spring. So I'm using permanent matter deep and ultramarine blue here to get a nice purpley purple. It's a technical term there, purpley purple. And when I have a color like this, I want to think, are there other places I can put it? So I'm going to put some here. I'm going to find some little places in the path here, and I need to lighten it just to keep it in that family of values that are in the path down here. But I can sneak little bits of that purple into this path too, and it's going to contrast nicely with that light spring yellow color. So now we're starting to get some nice glowing effects here, which is nice. That's what we wanted. Let me bring out a little bit of green in this cedar tree right here. We've got that purple laid on. Now I can put some nice thick brush strokes of green right in there. And I want to just go ahead and make sure I get these. I want to make sure that I go ahead and get these fence posts in here. So we're starting to lose our light now, just like I knew we would. So we have to start getting imaginative here. That's why I tried to get all that sunlight in there right off the bat. And this is our center of interest right here, so we want to be careful what we're doing. We don't want to get sloppy right at our center of interest, because this is where we're leading the eye. So we want to have nice little bits of painting right in here. So these little fence posts are really little bits of detail that are going to draw your eye even more to that area. I'm using some ultramarine and burnt sienna, a little bit more burnt sienna this time, to create this warm brown color that's over here on this bank. I want to accentuate this bank just a little bit more. Help lead our eye down in towards the center of interest there. And I want to brush in these trees back here and just give them a little bit more of a feathery effect to their tops. So we don't want too many solid lines back in this distance. Here we want everything to be nice and light and airy. And I can come back and paint that mountain with ultramarine blue, a little bit of that purple. The trick here is making sure the value's right. So we can play with the color on this mountain, but we want to get the value right. So it's a little bit lighter than that. You can test it. You can put your brush down and see how it looks. And I want to bring it on across here so that our eye sees that mountain is going on across in the distance here. That's a little bit too much of an angle. I want to bring that up just a little bit more. I want it angled, but I don't want it to be so much of a sweeping angle there. Bring some of this yellow in, this yellowish green right into this little bit again that's in the middle. I want to lose that. It's nice. Just little hints of it. And let's bring our shadows across, remember? So it's easy to forget to do these shadows. So we've got this green here. Now, when the shadows come across the trail, can't see them right now because the sun went behind a cloud, but I paid attention to them earlier, and they had a nice purple to them. So a little less green here. What's important is the value is just slightly darker. So we'll bring this across here. It comes all the way across the path here. And bring some shadows across in here in the distance too. Just a hint of some. But we can't forget to put them in the grass too. So we grab our darker green and we continue them on into the grass just a little bit. Even this middle part of the grass here in the path, the shadow is going to turn more of a dark green color. And there's some little bits of shadow that come out here into the corner. Now these are strong lines, so they're going to lead our eye, so we have to be careful. We can counter this with some branches that come and point our eye back into the composition. So right here, now let's do a dark tree right here. Comes up and pulls our eye back into the composition. So I've just used 2 brushes at this point. I haven't really gotten into any tiny brushes, which I might bring out a couple here just to do a few little touches near the end of this painting. I like to keep those little detailed brushes around just for that, but right now I'm just using bristle brushes. So I've got this little detail brush here. Let's go ahead and pay attention. Let's pay a lot of attention to this tree because it's a big tree. It's a big part of our painting. Let's give it some variation here. So I want to see where this branch kind of comes up here and just stops. It's got some little branches that come off of it. And I'm almost outlining some of these branches, and that's going to give that glowing light a chance to really shine, because you can see it against that darker tone. Now one thing you'll notice, there's a branch that comes out here and it's darker because we're actually seeing the underside of it, okay? So that's something interesting to remember, is when a branch is coming towards you and you see the underside of it, the value gets darker. Now when a branch goes away from you and you see the top part of it, it actually gets lighter. So like this branch here would be a lighter value. And that's going to give variety to the values of your trees, and it's going to make it feel like the branches aren't just coming and sticking straight out of the tree. There are lots of little branches in this painting because it's springtime, and these delicate branches are going to really fortify our feeling of light and airiness and delicateness to this subject. So I don't want to omit these little delicate touches. So I'm holding the brush nice and delicately between my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm just, with a real light touch, almost a sweeping type of brush stroke, I'm just creating these little tiny branches and creating a sense of these, they contrast nicely with the weightiness of some of the heavier branches. So again, we're creating contrast. Now I've got this dark blob down here. I don't know how it got there, but I want to take that out. So it's easy to get tunnel vision. That's why it's good to squint and see how things are working out in your painting. You might see something that bothers the heck out of you. There's still some white over here I need to take care of. I want to get all this covered up. I don't want these little bits of white competing with my sparkle down here in the center of interest area. It's a good time to step back and see how your work is looking. I want to continue to reinforce this light tone out in here. So real light, pale purple. And little choppy brush strokes too. So, sometimes I paint with more broad brush strokes, but a lot of times what I do is I let the scene tell me what type of brush strokes I should be using. So here I'm using a much more impressionistic touch, because to create a feeling of light and vibrancy, we don't want heavy, big, broad brush strokes. We want light, airy brush strokes. They're going to create more of a feeling of the spring morning that I'm after. So now the light is completely changed here, but again, I'm just using my memory. I'm not shifting my scene. I'm keeping this nice and sunlit. It'd be easy to forget what the heck I was doing and start painting a cloudy painting, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep things light and colorful here. We start to tap into our intuition at this stage, and if you've watched my videos before, I talk a lot about how it's really easy to describe what I'm doing in the beginning, and it gets a little bit more difficult at this stage because now I'm just balancing out areas. So you'll see that a lot of times I'll work over here a little bit, then I'll work over here a little bit, and it comes down to what feels right. And this is something that you'll develop over time, so don't get frustrated if your paintings aren't perfect right off the bat. There's something about painting that because it's so visual, and a lot of artists are perfectionists, that we want to see results right away. But you have to think about it. If you went and took music lessons and decided you were going to learn to play the piano, you're not going to sit down and start playing Mozart right off the bat. You have to learn the scales and the chords and how to put them together. And it's the same way with painting. So take your time and be patient with yourself and allow yourself to paint some bad paintings. It's okay, because I always say it's not paint that's wasted. Anytime you're out pushing paint around, you're learning something and you're improving your skill set. And that is what it's all about. So don't get discouraged, and keep getting out there and pushing paint around. If you're following along with me in the videos, that's good too. You can try that. I've got no problem with people working, you know, along with me and painting what I'm painting. If it's a learning process, you know, if you share them, just give me credit and share my my videos. I've been working on some more videos on my Patreon page too, so the link for that's in the description. It's just $1 a month, and you can get access to a lot more content. I've been doing some little painting exercises and additional full-length demos. And another cool thing I'm doing on there is I'm going over some of my favorite art books and picking a different art book each week or two and talking a little bit about you know, what it teaches. A lot of these are art instruction books that I think you'll value greatly from reading. I talk about, you know, what each one teaches and how you could use it to improve your painting too. So get on there and check that out. It's just $1 a month, $12 a year. You can, you know, pledge more. It's sort of a pay what you want platform, so that's cool, because I like to keep things affordable, because I know, especially when I was first starting out, I didn't have a lot of money to spend on art instruction, and I'm mostly self-taught, so I had to really reach out and find, get resourceful and use any means I could to figure out how to paint. And I know there are a lot of things that if I had learned them early on in my painting, I could have really sped up the process. So I try to tap into that when I'm painting. I try to think about what things what things would I have wanted to know when I was first starting, and then I try to talk a lot about those things. So we're coming into the close now. I've got the feeling that I want. So now it's just about fine-tuning the design. And again, the light is completely gone. We've got the clouds have come over and covered up our sun. So we need to be careful here. Again, we don't want to overwork this thing or work it into a cloudy painting. I loved how vibrant the light was when I first came out here. It's a good time too to take a break and stop and squint your eyes down and see what you think your piece needs. I talk about this a lot too in my videos. You know, a lot of times I'll get these things 95% done, and then I'll just stop and come back to them later and see what I think, if anything, needs to happen. A lot of times it's just a few little touches, or just to fix a brush stroke, a stray brush stroke here or there. Sometimes it's nothing at all. I'm just going to suggest some little tiny light branches here. As the sun's streaming through here, it would be catching a few little branches and lighting them up. So this is just a pale orange color. Just the tip of this little brush, and just hinting at some little light strokes. I want to come back here and give a few more delicate branches, carefully placed, of course, here at these later stages. We want to be careful with what we're doing. And because a lot of my trees, you know, they're not perfectly straight, but they're not squiggly either, I might just throw in a little squiggly tree. I like to do that sometimes, just to contrast with the trees that are going on. So what I'll do here is get a nice sort of a dark purple, and then maybe right in here where we've got a nice little space, I'll add just a tree that's a little bit more, has a few more twists and turns than some of the other trees. Just creates a little variation in the trees there. This is where that present moment awareness I talked about in my previous video I posted a couple days ago. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. It's one of my art musing videos, and it talks about just being in the moment and just taking time to listen to all the sounds. I love being outside and painting. You get the birds and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, and it's just an immersive experience, and it teaches us how to pay attention to things and to just be in the present moment. These little tiny touches of light. It's just little things that happen when the sunlight streams through the woods like this. Little bits of leaves that catch light, or a tiny bit of a branch, or even little moths or bugs in the air catching the light can create this nice sparkle. These don't all have to be the same color. We can have some that are really yellow and some that are red. We just want them to be nice and light. But we don't want too many. Again, we want to keep this center of interest the lightest area in here, as far as those sparkles go. It's a little bit of this phthalo blue in these shadows. I'm going to break up the color of this mountain just a little bit. I've got this nice phthalo blue on my brush. I'm going to pop it in a couple little places. It has to be the right value though. If it's too dark or too light, it won't work. It's going to give it just a little bit of an airiness to it and help push it back into the distance. Again, I want to be a little deliberate here with my brush strokes on these branches. Break them up just a little bit with some little dark spots. I want to decide what this happens to this one tree on the right where it comes down here. I've kind of gotten wishy-washy right in here, and I don't want that. I want a little bit more of that burnt sienna color. Bring that bank in front of that tree just a little bit, all the way over here to the right. And then I want to take a dark line. So ultramarine blue and cadmium red light is sort of a good dark, all-purpose dark. I don't like using straight up black. It's always too dark. This purple has a little bit of life to it. So you'll see me do this a lot, where I paint these trees in with these nice sort of a half dark tone, and then I'll come back and give them a little bit of a contour line that brings out their character. You'll see Van Gogh did that a lot, and it creates a nice, you don't want to do it all over the place. It'll create too much of a cartoon effect, but just in a few places it's nice. Can create some of this green reflected light in these trees too. So we've got all this nice green glowing grass that's going to bounce up into some of these trees. Let's get a nice green color here. Right up in there. Creating variations in colors. This is going to happen where you've got light bouncing up into the underside of branches. There. That's too light. Come back and darken that just a little bit. There's an important branch there. I didn't want to Don't want to make it disappear. I want to decide what happens to this branch. It kind of just fizzles out right here, and I don't want that. So come back. Take it all the way out here. I want these branches to feel nice and alive, so they're growing on out. And we can have branches come down too. See, we don't always have to have branches coming up. There are going to be areas like right over here. We can have branches come down. You know, now we could do some editing too. I'm looking at this painting. I don't actually like that big branch I just painted. So don't be afraid to paint something in. See if you like it. If you don't like it, just paint it out. We've got oil paint. That's what oil paint's good for that. I'm gonna come back here where the tree branches are with this purple. Paint right over top of that big long branch. And then come back with some of my light sky blue color, phthalo blue, and white. I didn't like the way it closed off the top of the composition there, so what I'm going to do is turn it and just take it up. So we go right here. Now let's turn it and take it up. I have a little branch come off of that one. I like the way that feels better. Compositionally, it makes a little bit more sense with the way that the tree is growing, and doesn't block us off here and lets our eyes sort of play around in this area a little bit more. Bring this branch over. There's this tendency to take your trees and you start here and you get up and you get near the top of the canvas and you go, ooh, and it kind of fizzles out. But don't be afraid to take that tree and just go on up, out. Pretend like the edge of the canvas isn't even there. Just draw your brush up and out. You can even take the back of the brush here and scratch in some little branches. This will help give a feeling, again, of light hitting some of these tinier branches. And again, be careful with this because a few of them will look good. If you do too many, it'll look like a technique that you just used as a crutch. And these can cross over some of these other strokes. Maybe there's, some of these little things down here happening too. There are some little tiny light strokes going on down on the ground. It's little bits of old grass. And create a nice sort of a peach color here. Nice and light. And just hit some of these little bits of color. I'm stepping back and squinting my eyes down again. I want to make sure you're squinting at your work and seeing what's going on. Bring some of that up. Just a little bit there. I don't think that light would actually come up there too much though, because the sun's sort of streaming over that little hillside, so I want to make sure I'm not getting the light up there too much. getting really close now. I don't want to overwork this thing. Bits of light hitting over here just to add a little interest to that side. And let's get a little bit of light on the side of one of these trees over here. So this light's kind of coming in from the side here, so there might be some areas right here near the center of interest especially. It's not a lot, it's just a little touch. Just a little touch, just a little sparkle out there. We can have that happen here too in this big tree in a couple of places. And again, you can try this stuff, and if it doesn't work, just paint it back out. I don't really like it on the big tree as much. Come back in there. I'm going to edit out this branch just a little bit too. Like I said, you get to this stage, you can start changing things a little bit. You might like something, you might like other things. You might not like some stuff. So it's just push and pull. You don't want to make any huge compositional changes. You want to try to get your composition how you want it. But it's okay to change a few things like little branches or a little direction of a mountain or something like that, just slightly. You know, you don't want to get too much. You don't want to get in there and change things too much. Sunlight's popping back out here, so I get a chance to reassess what I'm doing as far as the lighting effect goes. Just a little bit of light on the other side of this cedar tree right here that's nice. At this stage we're using nice thick paint, you know. We start off thin, but we can really start layering the paint up in the later stages too. Add a little variation to the shadow where it comes across the path. that it's not so straight. We've got a little bit of a variation in there. Now, the sunlight's popping back out, and I'm seeing something I want to do. I'm seeing a lot more of this little tiny bits of this light out in here in the distance. Little branches that are catching light. This little sparkly quality to this picture is what made me want to paint it in the first place. So it's okay to kind of play it up just a little bit, exaggerate it. Love this little bits and touches of light. It's almost like the paint, the landscape's made out of little gems and jewels out here. This is nice to have that nice solid blue mountain back there, because with all of this sparkly light and everything in the foreground, it's nice to have something as a foil. So something to have this light contrast with, something that's more flatly painted. Anytime you have something that's really dark, you want an area that's light, nice and light. And if you have areas that are light and sparkly like that, it's nice to have a little bit of an area for it to give your eye some rest. So this tree here and this mountain, they're nice foils to all that sparkly light. So I'm getting close now to being finished with this one. This painting will be available on my website, kylebuckland.com. The link is in the description below. One thing we want to consider too as we draw near is how far do we want to take this. So if you watch the beginner videos, you know that a lot of times I stopped before it was officially finished. And I didn't talk a lot about how to finish a painting. But now that we're getting into a little bit more further along here with our studies, we want to be considerate of, at what point are we overworking? The saying, you don't want to beat a dead horse. It's true with painting. You want to stop while you're ahead. I would much rather underwork a painting than overwork a painting. I say that a lot, and it's very true. So the trick is to figure out where the finish is, where the finish line is, and what that means to you. And it's going to be different for everybody, because some people love to have a really finished, highly polished painting, and then some people like just the almost abstract qualities in a sketch. So my advice to you is deliberately do a little bit of both. See what happens when you just work and work and work on a painting. See if you can feel that point where you start to lose maybe some of the spontaneity in it, and then see if you can determine where exactly that is, or where that happens at. And then, on the other side of the coin, go out and see if you can paint a painting in 15 minutes and force yourself to stop before you feel like it's actually finished. Look at those results and see, which one you like better. See if you feel like one's more successful, and then try to see if maybe you want to find a happy medium between the two. So that's a lot of times what I try to look for. I love the spontaneity in a sketch, and I can easily overwork a painting and work all that spontaneity right out of it. But there's also something to be said for a piece that has a little bit of time spent on deciding how far you want to take it. A good rule of thumb is when you start questioning every brush stroke, when the should I's start replacing the why nots, it might be time to stop. So when you first start painting, a lot of times you're right in it and you're just making all these quick decisions, and then after a while you start to go, oh, should I do that? Should I do that? And that might be when it's time to call it quits. This nice reflected light on that tree right there. Might be just a little bit too bright. Tone it down a little bit. A bit too vibrant. So play with it, give yourself time to experiment and don't rush the results. Take time, paint lots and lots of paintings. It's more important that you're out painting than you're out painting great paintings every time. Get out there and push the paint around. Have fun with it. Don't worry so much about the results. The results will come. The good paintings are a result of painting a lot. And that's true for any art. If you get too preoccupied with painting a perfect painting every time, you're going to kill the joy out of it. You're not going to want to go out because you're going to say, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm successful when I get out there and paint. And that's going to stop you from being able to get to where you're painting the good ones. The good ones will come. Miles and miles of canvas, tons and tons of paint. You have to get out there, push the paint around, let things happen, be okay with failure. Let yourself be a beginner. It's so important, especially if you're just starting, or if you've been painting a different way and you're starting to learn about Impressionism and plein air painting. There are learning curves to this way of painting, so let yourself fail. Don't worry about getting it just right. I know we're all taught at an early age to strive for success and do our best and blah blah blah. But part of that is understanding how to work out a process and how to get out there and experiment and let yourself be okay with not getting it right every single time. Heck, I always say, if you're having trouble mixing color, just set out your paints and don't even worry about painting a painting. Just spend an hour and a half seeing how many different colors you can mix. Sometimes by by taking some of the problems away, you can focus better on the one problem that's giving you trouble. If you're having trouble with values, just paint with black and white paint. Take the color mixing out of it and just get out and see if you can paint a landscape just using black and white, and that'll help you pay attention to values, so how dark or how light it is. There's no exact science to this thing. And that's what I love about art. I was never good at math in school because it was one way was right and one way was wrong. I loved the interpretive qualities of art and literature and how we could, get in there and play around with things and make things our own. That's part of the fun in it for me, is playing around with stuff and letting the process be the journey. So you hear the old saying about, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. That is so true with painting. We're not in this thing to paint a masterpiece every time or get a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art. Those are lofty pipe dreams a lot of times. They might come, but if you get that stuck in your head that that's what you're after, then you won't enjoy the process. You'll be so focused on the destination that you won't allow yourself to enjoy the simple process of just getting out and painting a study or jotting down a few color notes. And that's what it's all about. So I think I'm getting really close to being finished on this one. I'm going to go ahead and sign it. Now again, there's going to be a side that the signature is going to look better. Let's look at this big tree here, and our center of interest is over on the left. I'm going to sign this painting on the right, and I want to get a color that looks good and works with the painting. So I'm going to get a nice purple in there that's dark, sort of the dark purple that I was using in the trees. Not too dark, but dark enough to register. And plenty of medium on my brush so that the paint flows off of my brush here. I don't want to put it too close to the edge because when I frame this thing, it's easy to accidentally cover up your signature. So give yourself a little bit of room. And I've said this before, try to make your signature legible. I see some people paint these fancy signatures and you can't read what they say. So if people aren't always going to know who painted the painting when they're standing there looking at it, but they might be able to read the signature and then go Google your name or something. So it's like a calling card. So I try not to make my signature so fancy that you can't read it. My signature is very plain, capital letters, K. BUCKLAND. So if you haven't already decided how you want to sign your paintings, it's something to consider. just like I did a few little light touches, I want to do a few little tiny dark touches too. And these, like I said, could be little leaves silhouetted against things, silhouetted against the sky. It's just going to break up the feeling of heaviness in this painting. Everything I'm doing here is wanting to convey a sense of light, the airiness of early spring. Even could be little birds off in the distance or up in the trees. Do some little touches of bright red here too. I love a little bit of bright red in a painting. This time of year especially, we get these little buds coming on the trees, especially in a couple of weeks. I'm pushing things along here a little bit and making it a little bit more spring-like, but that's okay. Again, it's not what's out there, it's what's in our minds that's important. We're just using the landscape. Do some of these little fence line there. You'll see me do that sometimes. I'll sign a painting and I'll go, oh yeah, I want to do a few more things. And that's okay. Don't feel like you're tied to stopping right when you sign it. Don't overwork it, but finish it. Alright, so I'm going to call that quits. I say that and then I do one more thing. Check out my website, kylebuckland.com, to see the finished piece. If you want to become a patron, it's pay what you want. It's at least $1 a month, which I think everybody can afford, but if you want to sign up and pledge more, that'd be wonderful. It's you get access to a lot more content. I've got book reviews, product reviews. I'm going to be doing some behind the scenes stuff on there and more full-length demos, and I'll be uploading new videos to my Patreon feed on a weekly basis too, so you get about twice as much content and different kinds of content on there. And then that also just helps me with my artistic endeavors and helps me keep these videos free here on YouTube for everybody. So if you want to get on there, check that out. That link is in the description below too. It's www.patreon.com/KyleBuckland. And thanks so much for watching. I look forward to bringing you some more videos soon. If you haven't subscribed, you can do so below. You can subscribe, and if you want to get notifications when I upload new videos, you can click the bell for notifications. Thanks for all the likes and the shares and all the new subscribers. I'm so excited. We're getting lots of new subscribers every single day, and it really means a lot to me. And I know I say this a lot, but I really do mean it. It's such a joy to know that so many people are watching the videos and are getting out there and learning how to push paint around and be expressive with color. And if you want to contact me and show me what you've been up to, you can email me at kyle.buckland@gmail.com. I'd love to see what you're working on. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.